The position of the modern NFL wide receiver was created by the style of play by one man. This man had a unique style all his own, and it created a whole new position in the NFL. We disclose who this player is in a conversation we had back in 2021 with historian Joe Ziemba, all coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. And have you ever had one of those times where you're cleaning out the attic or the garage or your basement and you find some of these hidden treasures that you forgot you had and sit there and say, wow, this is something special? Well, we have some of those in some of our video logs that we had during interviews that have never been seen before. And we're going to go through and take some of these and talk about some legendary players with some legendary historians. And tonight we have one from Joe Ziemba back in 2021 from our Jersey series. And we were talking about the NFL's greatest, the jersey number 14. And this guy's pretty unique. We have Joe coming up in just a second here to tell us all about this unique player.
We were talking about receivers. One of my receivers, and of course I like the old guys, would be Don Hutson of the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, they don't get much better than Don Hutson.
You know, it was kind of interesting back in the late 50s when they started picking out all-decade teams and all-time teams. That publication called the Pro Football picked their first all-time team and not only named him to the all-time team, but named him the top player up until that time, which would have been 37 years. And they were talking about how elusive he was, how fast he was. Hudson, I know, claimed that he ran a 9.8 100, which was pretty good there for the early 40s.
Definitely.
And, one of the defenders was quoted in the article and saying, and his quote was, when you talk about guarding Hudson, you just have to say that all Hudson can do is just beat you. No need to say more. He has the most baffling change of pace I've ever seen. The hardest pass receiver I have ever seen to cover. And so with that, of course, he accomplished so much with Green Bay. 11 years with the same team, first jersey ever retired by the Packers, won 3 NFL titles. And our first little bit of trivia, though, before he played his first game with the Packers, the owner of the Washington Redskins kind of said, whatever gave you the idea that this bird-legged Don Hutson is an All-American, the greatest pass receiver in college football, Green Bay will release him before October. George Preston Marshall, the favorite of George House of the Bears. So I thought that would really get a player going. And sure enough, I think I saw an article that said Hudson said, yeah, that did it for him. And he was, of course, the NFL's first 1,000-yard receiver. Led the league, and I think when he retired in receiving yards, receiving yards, touchdowns when he retired, and then went in the Hall of Fame in 1963. So he was the league leader almost every year he played back then. And I think he really deserves what that one publication gave him in 1957 of the best NFL player of all time until then. And one little sidebar, he, of course, came down to Chicago a couple times a year and played the Bears and the Bears and the Cardinals. And in 1945, the Cardinals, and you may have heard this story, but Cardinals had a player named Mats Tonelli who went into World War II right at the start of it. In fact, even before then, and he was in a prisoner of war camp with the Japanese. For the entire war, he survived the Battle of Bataan. And Mr. Bidwell, the owner of the team, came up to him in the hospital when he came back to Chicago, and he said, Mats, you're still under contract. We expect you to be out there. And here's a guy who went from 210 pounds to about 90 pounds during captivity, but he worked and got back out in the field at the end of the season in 45 and lines up as a defender. And who's he up against but Don Hutson?
Oh.
And Mats Tonelli said that Hutson looked at him and said, don't worry, kid. We'll take care of you. And I thought that was such a tender story from this great All-Pro that he was looking out for one of his brother-in-arms and a great person as well as a great player. So Don Hutson's right up there with my list of top number 14s.
Oh, most definitely. Now, I dug up a little bit of trivia, and again, I go back to his college game. He played for Alabama, and in 1934. I mean, think about that era and what they did. It was mostly running game. Hutson hauled in 6 passes in one game for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns in a 29-13 victory over Stanford in the Rose Bowl. I mean, a big stage against a good team in an era where they didn't really put the ball in the air very much. So that's pretty impressive. I thought that was a real good character trait to show there, that what he was going to do in the NFL, maybe a foreshadowing of sorts.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why Crowley Lambeau was able to open up his offense for passing, having Don Hutson out there all those years. It certainly made it a little bit easier. Of course, Hutson was a very humble man and always said, it's not me, it's my quarterback, Cecil Isbell, and his teammates, which was, again, showing the humility of the man as well.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskinddispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskinddispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.